Welcome to the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council's Hot Sheet Live, our pandemic newsletter geared toward minority businesses. Again, we're going to start in a few minutes. I am Sharon Pinder, CEO of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council, and that's CRMSDC, and operator of the Minority Business Development Agency, and that's MBDA, Business Center, Washington, D.C., and the Federal Procurement Center. Now, during this hour, we're going to walk you through the abyss of acronyms, but hold us accountable to explain them. If you have any questions, please send them using the question icon. And if you want to acknowledge a point that we're making, act like you're in church and use the hand raise icon. But wait for your patience as we go through all of this. Now, there's a couple of housekeeping tidbits that I'd like to share. The first one. Bathrooms are located somewhere on your floor, hopefully. So make sure you know where they are. But the most important housekeeping item, I'd like you to refrain from going to your refrigerators during this hour. I know it's going to be easy, but we have an action-packed, content, I think, savvy hour, and we don't want you to miss anything. But seriously, we hope that you are staying healthy and safe during this crisis. We know that every day you're drowning in emails, overpowered with a slew of webinars. So thank you for attending this one. You know, this week started out with some really and just sombering kind of headlines. It was a headline saying that U.S. enters hardest, saddest week in coronavirus crisis. The Washington Post talked about the U.S. enters crucial weeks after grim milestones of most deaths reported in a day. The U.S. Surgeon General compared it to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. But we see what's happening in terms of the governors across the country that are calling for orders to stay at home. The crisis has hit all of us, but today we are focusing on the resilience of minority businesses and how we navigate doing business with the federal government during this particular point in time. Again, we have about 600 people on in attendance, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. So if we do not get your questions in during this live setting, we will follow up to you, and we'll have and answer your questions at a later time. So we're going to get started in just a second, but follow us on social media at CRMSDC is our handle on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Just one moment. Okay, we're about to begin. If I can, let's see if we can share the agenda. You know, there is an old economic adage: when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. And from an economic standpoint, I submit to you that during this crisis, when America sneezes, minority businesses catch pneumonia. So welcome again to Hot Sheet Live. Be careful how you say that. The CRMSDC Business Consortium Hot Sheet is a special newsletter we started a few weeks ago to specifically focus on surviving the coronavirus pandemic for minority businesses. So for our previously produced newsletters, please go to website www.crmsdc.org. Who are we? We are the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council. We're one of 23 affiliates of the National Minority Supply Development Council. As I shared, CRMSDC is also the operator of two MBDA centers, the MBDA Center, Washington, D.C., led by Dennis Smith, and the Federal Procurement Center, the only federally funded center in the nation, led by Tommy Marks. I'd like, just to understand, and we'll get into this a little bit later, what we're all about. But at this particular point in time, I'd like to share the screen with folks that team of experts that we've assembled here today. And so if the team could place yourselves on camera so I can introduce you, that would be a beautiful thing. Good morning.
Good morning, Sharon.
Hey, good morning, Kay. Kay,
Good
okay,
morning.
no problem. Good to see you. I'm gonna get in this conversation. Good morning, Antonio.
Good morning,
Doc.
everybody.
How you doing? I think we have one more
Hey,
waiting.
All right, great. Sorry for the delay.
So the team's all here. How's everybody doing this morning?
Doing well.
It's okay. Okay, that's beautiful. And so I want to introduce, and I want to, take the time to introduce everyone in the beginning. And so when we start, and dealing with chatting with everyone, we have gotten these preliminary introductions out of the way. But before we do that, let's talk about what's going to happen during this hour. The first conversation or chat we're having is doing business with the federal government doing COVID-19. That chat's with Tommy Marks. And then we're going to move right into the role of USIS. And that is a chat with Riplinger-Baltz of the Corps of Engineers, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And then the key stimulus bill provisions and what's next, that's a chat with Antonio Das from the SBA. And then everyone and Dennis Smith is going to, we're going to open it up for chats, but during each of those chats, we're going to pause in between chats to take questions and then open it up for a broader chat at the end and wrap up. And so that's kind of the roadmap for today. So let me just introduce who we have on the screen. We have Tommy Marks, Director of the Federal Procurement Center. As director, Tommy is responsible for assisting minority businesses with identifying and competing for federal contracts. Prior to the Federal Procurement Center, Tommy served in the Senior Executive Service, SES, and I've told people, by the way, that we're going to drown them in acronyms. And he is the former director of the U.S. Army Small Business Programs. A veteran of the U.S. Army, Tommy served as lieutenant colonel, he's now retired, specializing in acquisition and aviation. We're honored today to have also to chat with Ms. Kay Riplinger-Baltz, Acting Associate Director of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And we're so honored to have you, Kay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
She is responsible for establishing procedures and publishing direction and guidance for the small business program at all USACE installations and activities and serves as the principal advisor to the commanding general of USACE. Another sought after leader this morning that we have on tap is Mr. Antonio Das, District Director of the SBA Washington Metropolitan District Office. Antonio, is that WMATO? Is that acronym?
We do say WMATO, correct.
I did it correctly. Very, very good. Appointed
Yes.
in 2013, WMATO District Director, Mr. Das and his team provide business development assistance to the SBA's largest portfolio of firms participating in the 8A Business Development Program. Additionally, as District Director, he oversees the delivery of SBA's business financing products, contracting programs, and entrepreneurial coaching services. Now, rounding out our team today is Mr. Dennis Smith. Say hi, Dennis. He serves as the third leg of our consortium. I'll talk about that as the director of our MBDA Business Center, Washington, D.C. Dennis has extensive experience in establishing and implementing policies and procedures or programs to maximize small and minority business participation in the acquisition of goods and services in local and state sectors. So we've moved into the agenda. What I'd like to do, if we can, just so that people have a handle as we move forward in terms of CRMSTC and our MBDA centers, let's look at our business consortium diagram. And the so what and big deal about the business consortium diagram. And I'm a visual person, right? And not me. I don't like looking at myself. So let's look at when we look at the business consortium diagram. I just wanted to give our audience a sense of our consortium. So when you hear us talk about the business consortium, and that's the Capital Region Council, which I told you is part of the National Minority Supply Development Council. I have 23 other affiliate CEOs across the country, and the consortium of the MBDA Center. So we're a triple threat or unprecedented triple access to new regional, national, and global business opportunities. So I needed to get that commercial out of the way so that we can start the conversations. So Tommy, let's start the conversation with you. And guys, we will bring you back as we move along the program. Is that okay?
So it's you and I.
I know. I'm waiting for we like our to move right into the main conversation. And remember, audience, we are monitoring your questions, and so use the question icon on your screen. Tommy, in fiscal year 2018, the federal government spent more than $550 billion on contracts, an increase of more than 100 billion from 2015. This increase, as I understand it, is largely driven by spending on national defense. So let's start, Tommy, with the question that you, as the director of the Federal Procurement Center, and you've been integrated into federal government for many years, but let's start with the question that you get more often. I want to get that out of the way. And although we're not, excuse me, going to focus on federal government 101, but let's just share some fundamentals. If you're positioning your company to do business with the federal government, you must walk in the door with fill in the blank.
You must walk in the door by going to the Systems for Award Management in order to register with the federal government. Because if you really want to get paid, if you're not registered there, you won't do business with them. And that's the really start point for anybody that's starting their business or already in business, but has not done work with the federal government.
So
additionally,
I'm sorry, Tony, go ahead.
Additionally, as we sit here with this current crisis, which is not a norm for us, if you're interested in helping with disaster relief, you must be registered in the disaster response registry, which is also part of the Systems for Awards Management System, which is better known as SAM, the acronym.
And Tommy, I wanted to pull that up, but the before we get into that, I just wanted to answer the federal government 101 question. And the federal government 101 question: if you're going to do business with the federal government, you've got to have your DUNS number and you have to be registered in SAM. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so I want to shift the focus a little bit around now that we have walked into a crisis, and you've been in crisis management most of your career. And so when you walk into a crisis, there are certain things that have to happen as a result of that. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so
you pull out your contingency plans.
Okay. And so if in order to do business with the federal government during a crisis, and could you explain to people why this crisis is unlike any other crisis that we see that the government deals with?
Right. Well, first and foremost, all 50 states and territories have declared help that they need from the federal government in this crisis. We know that normally does not happen. I mean, most of the time it's regionalized. Hurricanes down in the south, or tornadoes in the Midwest, those types of things take place, or tornadoes and snowstorms, on the eastern seaboard. So this particular crisis, I mean, the president, we live it every day right now. The president declared a national emergency back on the 13th of March. And he did that in accordance with the Robert Stafford Act, some of the words you see on the slide. And that's the authority, the law that gives him the authority to do so. And once he did that, then the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security was now directed to execute disaster relief. And and he does that. The Secretary does that through his organization called the Federal Emergency Management Agency, better known as FEMA, to do the actual execution of disaster relief. And so that's the initial part of that scenario where that takes place.
Okay. So Homeland Security activates FEMA. FEMA then extends to its partners.
Correct. So FEMA, once they're activated, they have they become the lead for the federal government, and all federal agencies fall in line to support FEMA in taking care of the disaster. And in this case, one of the most familiar ones you hear about is the United States Army Corps of Engineers, because most disasters tearing stuff down and communities have to be rebuilt. So the Corps of Engineers and Cable talk about that, but has a military and civil mission. And from a day-to-day perspective, the bridges, most of the bridges that we cross, those bridges are sanctioned and built and signed off on by the Corps of Engineers. That's part of their mission. And disaster is number one when they have to pull out their contingency plans, along with other partners like DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, American Red Cross, the Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster that Antonio will talk more about, which is totally different than what we're going through today. And then together, they're the boots on the ground, FEMA with their partners doing the disaster operations in coordination. And this is important, in coordination with state emergency management offices, because federal dollars ultimately flow from the top down to the state and local level. So though you must be registered in our systems at the federal level, you must, for example, state of Maryland, if I'm a contractor in the state of Maryland, I need to also have a working relationship with the state emergency management folks, because eventually Governor Hogan designates what has priority in the state of Maryland, not the federal government.
So what's different is that, to your point, usually this happens in a segmented, whether it was a hurricane or something that they were recovering from. It has never been that it's all of the U.S. and the territory, so things have a priority and a pecking order, but it's all pushed down to the state level. And so you not only have to know how to do business, be registered in SAM, and I know you're going to talk about the disaster recovery registration in just a moment, but you need to have the registrations or certifications to also do business in that state, because in the example you used with Maryland, it goes from FEMA to MEMA, which is the state level FEMA.
Yes.
In other words, right? And so talk a little about, and so what people don't understand, whether it's federal or state or local government, there's always rules of engagement. And so if you want to play in the game, you have to understand the rules. So tell us about the rules, what, Staff Act, FAR, and all that stuff.
Okay, so already briefly talked about SAMs. You got to be registered in SAMs, and then you must be registered in the disaster response registration portion of SAMs, because that's where the states and the federal government, the agencies, go to pull their contractor support. The Stafford Act, Section 307, what that is the Stafford Act in itself. FAR Part 18 is the implementation of the law. In particular, in that law, it talks about contracting at the local level, at the point of where the disaster is. And so folks have to understand, I might be in Virginia and I want to get a contract in Maryland. I'm not going to be first in order to get that contract. It's the local companies, because they live and work there, and that's a law. Every contractor, Sharon, needs to be familiar with FAR Part 18, which is emergency acquisitions, and the subpart, which is talked about disaster emergency assistance. That disaster emergency assistance will tell you that most contracting will be done at the local level. It's not that they don't need help. So if I'm an outside contractor from outside the state of Maryland, I need to be teaming with somebody in the state of Maryland in order to possibly provide some support and get contracts. Again, we're dealing in all 50 states. So the standard model of FEMA has a 30-day phase. We have already been in 30 days, and we know that is continuing. And then they've got a 30 to 90 day, and then a long-term recovery. Those models have been broken, and we got a continuous process. We don't know when the end is, but contracting support is clearly going to still be needed. So it doesn't go without saying continually that we need to understand how our states also operate individually. And by the way, all resources are limited. Distribution becomes the big challenge from a logistics standpoint, and that's what you're seeing every day on the news. You know, as you see, Governor Cuomo, New York was the hotspot #1. So when, even though the activation started and the federal government got involved, there's a priority list. If you line 10 states up, and we know we saw in the news where governors were saying, hey, I'm not getting any help. Well, they weren't first in line. So the priorities are made based on where the most severe work is needed.
Okay. Okay. And so it is, and that is why it's important that as business owners, if you want to do business with the federal government, to understand what the hierarchy is and what the players are involved. And we're focusing on what happens during a disaster. But that's another seminar, another webinar that talks about how do you just do business with the federal government, period. But in terms of the rules of engagement of during a disaster, that's what we see up on the screen. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
You talked a little bit about some of the other partners. I kind of wanted to reiterate. We're really fortunate today that we have USACE here, U.S. Corps of Engineers, but you also talked about, you said some other partners that would also be engaged as well.
Right, the American Red Cross has a mission that supports FEMA this time, as we know, medical services, blood, FEMA working with American Red Cross, you know, pluses up in order to get that portion of the mission done. Antonio is going to talk about what they do at SBA because there's a lot of differences with this particular crisis than they would normally do business. But on the Department of Defense side, you really have two Department of Defense organizations. The Defense Logistics Agency is the big logistics bearer for Department of Defense, especially for common supplies. And so what I can tell you real time is our office has been in contact with key people at the Defense Logistics Agency, where we have been able to put contractors in touch with them. For example, in their Philadelphia office, where medical supplies are bought and stocked, and non-medical supplies. And so as you've heard the term, it's a whole of government effort at this point. And so never before did we have to act, probably the amount of activation and involvement of those agencies. But that's taking place as we speak today.
Okay, so I think that we have an idea. I think that we can open up to a couple of questions, Tommy, at this particular point in time. But before we do, were there any other points that you wanted to make?
The key point to take away is that if you want to do business with the federal government, especially in a time of national emergency, you must be in the system. In SAMS, you must be in particular registered in the disaster response registration. Now, what I would tell you, it's a lot of reading, but the bottom line is, if you're a company that you have a proposal that you believe the government can use, they're taking unsolicited proposals, and you don't have to be registered in SAMS to submit that proposal for the government to review it, or even if they advertise one, you can submit a proposal to do that work without being in SAMS at the time. Typically, you must be registered at the time you submit your proposal. So that's some of the flexibility, Sharon, that when FAR Part 18 goes through, that you know, it's not an everyday read for the layman. What I would tell you, my own personal experience, and I've never experienced anything like this, and I did government contracting for several years and never had to use that particular part of the regulation.
Oh, wow. So you're saying, though, even though reading FAR may be like watching paint dry or counting rice, it is important if you want to do business with the federal government.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good advice. Any other tidbits that you want to share before we open it up to any questions?
Oh,
But
I think
you know,
let's go to the questions.
yeah, let's take a couple of questions. But I'm excited that our next segment, you're going to go right to an important source with the Corps of Engineers to understand how that works, how that gets filtered down to the state level as well. So
Exactly.
any questions? We have any questions on standby that we can take from our question monitors, Ken or Sonia?
Yes, the first question is from Anthony. Anthony wants to know, what is the best approach for following up with a contracting officer once you've made an initial outreach communication? Is there a reasonably accepted time frame?
So I would tell you, if we're talking anytime at this point. Once I'd give it a week when you submit your inquiry, and if you got a name and a number, I would call. If you've already emailed them and you didn't get a response, I'd do a second email. But if you got a name and a number, I'd call. In these times right now, what they've set up is special email boxes to receive those inquiries. And Kay's going to talk about what they've done at the Corps of Engineers. And then they also are providing names of contacts, real live people. Now, mind you, I mean, they don't have 5 or 6, 7 lines, so it may be busy. You got to keep trying, but that's what's happening right now.
And Tommy, what you also said is that not only you do that, because there's a lot of innovation that's happening now, because you see the large companies doing that now, but you also have to make sure that you have the relationships, because business is about relationships, to make sure you have those relationships at the local levels.
That is correct.
I think we have time for another question.
I have a question here. Considering the time impacts of COVID-19, what is the most effective approach to have an agency, a contracting officer, make a sole source decision on a service solution?
What I would tell you is back to FAR Part 18 and acquisition flexibilities. Their contracting officers are making those decisions as we speak right now today, where they're doing sole source to 8As, they're doing sole source to non-8As, or they're setting it aside for certain socioeconomic groups. And that's taking place. Now, what's key and have to understand, it goes back to rules of engagement. They do not have to advertise like they would normally do on an award or requirement. So, I mean, they go to that database, disaster response registry, and they pull out a contractor, and that contractor meets the requirement of what they're looking for. They can make that award. If that award is under at $250,000, which is a simplified acquisition threshold, that can be increased by the agency head, say to $500,000. They can make those awards without ever announcing those, just by going to that registry. I can't stress enough about how important it is to be in the registry for what we're dealing with right now.
And Tommy, one of the things you also said that even the most seasoned federal government contractors or business owners did not know, or some of them do not know, about the disaster response registration within SAM. So it's real important, correct?
That is correct, because it's not something they do every day.
And but what you do every day is you stand at the ready to help minority businesses do business with the government. And as we wrap up this session, we do have follow-up that follows up on this particular webinar, and we'll be doing other webinars. But as Tommy marks as the lead of the Federal Procurement Center, we have created a safe place for minority businesses to make inquiries relative to doing business, particularly with the federal government, but specifically right now during COVID-19. So Tommy, thank you for this particular segment. And we're going to segue into the next segment, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to sit back and listen to two veteran folks that we have in you and Kay Riplinger-Baltz talk about USACE, the Corps of Engineers, and what happens during this disaster. So thank you, Tommy, and I'll be back doing the Q&A.
Thank you, Sharon. It is definitely my pleasure to introduce my colleague. She's not a former colleague, still my current colleague, Ms. Kay Riplinger-Baltz from the Corps of Engineers. So Kay, you know, we're going through some tough times, and we know the Corps has that dual mission, and the one they're exercising right now, I mean, simultaneously exercising their military mission around the world, but right now the big fight is on the civil side. Could you share with us, the audience, what that role is during this time frame?
The role right now, as you had mentioned earlier, it's a little bit different. The Corps is used to responding to disasters. We've done that for many years, but we're also used to disasters being in certain areas. Maybe we have 1 or 2 regions that are affected. What's different this time is it's across the United States. Normally, we have 1 or 2 regions, and so other regions can come in and kind of assist and backfill. We don't have that this time. Everyone is on the front lines. As you had mentioned, FEMA gets involved, and then FEMA assigns the Army Corps of Engineers. When the funding arrives, the Army Corps of Engineers can move out. Now, as far as being a business to do business with the Army Corps of Engineers, yes, all of the facts that you stated are very correct. Let me add a couple things. If, as a small business, our members of the audience do not already know their small business deputy, I highly encourage reaching out and finding who is your local small business deputy, or who is the small business deputy in the area you wish to do business in. There is a map on the Army Corps page for small business, and it's a mostly interactive map. You can click in the area that you want to do business, and you should get linked in with some contact information. Now, the contact information may not give you the name, the picture, the phone number. It may just be a provide us information. Do that. The small business deputies will get the notification that you've reached out to them. Now, also understand the small business deputies are really scrambling. There is 1 of them in each district, and they are fielding a lot of questions. So please be a little bit patient. They'll do the best they can at getting back to you, but it might take a few days. As far as getting those awards, one of the things that really helps, and I realize we're a little late to try and do that right for this event, but for moving forward in the future, a tactic that I have seen used and that was recommended by a contracting officer a few years ago. Choose a district that you're interested in and propose on an opportunity that is way beneath what you can do. Say you can easily do a $500,000 project. Maybe propose on that $50,000 project in a local park or a local campground, and then knock that out of the park. Do the best you can. Come in under cost, ahead of schedule. All of a sudden, your business's name gets ingrained into that district. To the contracting, to the small business deputy, to the PMs, they recognize that business's name. So then when we get to these sort of emergencies and we need to start pulling in people very quickly, your business's name is there saying, okay, we've worked with them before. We know they can get this done. Another area that I would encourage, besides reaching out, there'll be, once we get back to normal, there will be various outreach events, industry days. Attend those. Send at least 1 member of your team to go meet the people at the district. Within USACE, all of our contracting is done at the district level. The divisions oversee districts, but your main point of contact where you want to have the name and the face is at the district. And that's where I would encourage you to focus your attention on.
Okay, under what USACE is dealing with right now, supporting FEMA, what special things have you all put in place to capture capabilities and of contractors and check that they're in the sponsor registry?
We have 3 points of contact right now. There is a COVID-19, no spaces, just COVID-19 at USACE, usace.army.mil. If you can send your capability statement to that email, that is going into a database that's being collected by the contracting team for quick reference. Within the small business team, we also have 2 points of contact, Elizabeth White and John Solomon. I'll make sure that those emails are available to all those that are watching after this event. They are both collecting capability statements also and keeping track of them. Now, that's in addition to highly encourage people to be registered in the small business DSBS site. If people aren't familiar with that, you might want to go in and check what your business says that you can do. Yesterday, I received a wonderful capability statement from a small business, and they have some awesome items that they would like to provide. And I went back in to see, what are their NAICS codes? How are they registered? Well, they're registered as graphic artists, but that didn't line up with what they had sent. So I would encourage, if you're sending in capability statements, one of the things that's going to happen, the contracting office is going to go and see, are you registered and ready to do business?
Okay, and that's great advice, because clearly your capability statement, my capability statement should represent me and what I can do. And I know that when this first started, what I read was one of the things really to, when you send that email in with your capability statement, what the contracting officer, first thing the contracting officer is looking at is the subject line. Clearly have your company's name, as I understand, Kay, along with whether you are a small business construction, small business building supplies listed there. That's the first thing they're going to look at. And if it doesn't say that, because there's some key things they're looking at right now, not that it goes in file 13, but that won't get looked at as detailed.
Something else that I highly recommend is on your file name. I realize we make files for our own computer, but think that it's going to go to someone who may not be familiar with what you do. Label, if you are a SDVOSB, label that right before you label your business name or capabilities. It helps to make it jump out. An 8A, that in the file name will be there when someone is looking through the files. They're not going to see your email and everything else. They're going to see file names. And I can assure you, as the capability statements are coming in, they're not going to get renamed to best reflect what you do. They're going to get put into the file pretty much as you have named them. So do yourself a favor and broadcast, what socioeconomic group are you? Are you a small business? Are you an 8A? Let us know those things.
Okay. So, okay, before we go to questions, any other tips that you have that you want to share?
The small business program is there to help small businesses. I look forward to meeting many of you and working with you in the future.
Okay. So, questions from the audience?
Okay, there seems to be several inquiries coming in asking for you to repeat the email address that you shared to send capability statements to. Thank you.
Absolutely. The email address is COVID-19, COVID 19, just the number, at usace.army.mil. Mil has one L.
We have several questions about how to approach the obstacle offices and contract offices. Should we go after them, or should we wait for them to call us because we're already registered in the SAMS and disaster databases?
Thank you for the question. I highly encourage that you send an email and follow up with a phone call. Again, realizing people are very, very busy right now. They're getting it in all directions, but that doesn't mean you're not important. So please send the email. Let them know in the email that you're going to be following up with a phone call. Leave the message. Be patient. I know for me, sometimes it takes a week before I can finally get back on the phone calls. Our team is trying the best they can to reach out and to communicate, but they are one deep. So be persistent and, and let me know if you have reached out to a district or somewhere and you've just not gotten a response. Please let me know. I might be able to fill you in. Maybe that person is off having a baby right now and they're just not, that's why they're not answering mail. I can fill you in a little bit on the background. Or maybe that person is totally swamped and that's good information for me to have as well. And again, I'm not out to get anyone in trouble, but to find ways to help both the businesses and the team.
There's one important question I think we need to get out on the table now, and that is, will the federal government, how do we know the federal government will use minority businesses since DOL has suspended the affirmative action guidelines?
That's a really good question. In the contracting realm, in the small business realm, we don't necessarily look to see, is this business a minority business? Is this business a non-minority business? More what we are looking at initially is which socioeconomic category it falls into. As falling into a socioeconomic category assists across the Army Corps in meeting goals that we are assigned by the SBA and through the Department of Army, where we have to meet certain level of women-owned small businesses, service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, hub-zone small businesses. There is not a specific category for minority-owned. But again, that said, that doesn't mean that you're going to be brushed to the side. Bring your capabilities. Propose on those projects that are very likely below what you can do, but that you can knock out of the park, that you can excel at. That'll bring you back the next time.
And if I could add to that question, the Department of Labor, as Ken read the question, issued that guidance. But I want to be clear that the Department of Labor is not the authority for the acquisition side of the house. And that the message that they put out really pertain to the workforce. I personally talked to the Chief of Staff at the Department of Labor's office that was the Office of Compliance. And so that memo, which is a part of the acquisition flexibilities and a part of out of the Stafford Act of law that allows agency heads to waive certain things, and that's one of them. But this was about workforce, and what it specifically talked about was that me as a contractor getting a federal contract, an affirmative action plan is a part of that process when I contract with the federal government, and therefore they were waiving the requirement for me if I got a contract in support of COVID-19 that my affirmative action plan did not have to be established, and they would not evaluate me on that. But if I got any complaints about that fall under the affirmative action of rules and regulations, that they can still investigate those. That's what that memo was about, not about not hiring minority contractors. I want to be clear with that, not about not hiring minority contractors. Now, obviously, I did contracting for several years with the federal government. Not once did we go through, we looked at, your socioeconomic category, your proposal, not your ethnicity from that. But if you understand the demographics of small businesses in the socioeconomic groups, the majority of those businesses are minority businesses when you start laying the stuff out. So for clarification.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because I think that Department of Labor memo that came out got muddied the water, but we're focusing on the acquisition piece of it, not the labor piece. But I understand people were up in arms because it had the appearance that
Yes.
not looking, but if you're doing business with the federal government, and you look at minority businesses, it falls into the categories of disadvantaged businesses and those other things, as opposed to what the affirmative action plan on the workforce side. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I think we have time for a couple more questions for Kay. And Kay, again, thank you for explaining how USACE acts and the importance of developing these relationships in the districts with those district directors, because they then have, if I understand this correctly, they know what the opportunities are on the ground in those locales. Is that not correct?
That is very correct. The small business deputies in the districts also have the opportunity when a requirement comes forward and they know there's a small business that potentially could be sole sourced, that they can bring that to the table. If they know that there are 2 or more small business qualified, that in normal times, that can help weigh in making that requirement be a set aside as opposed to going out full and open.
Okay, and so again, businesses that are looking for opportunities, look at the local level in terms of usage. Do we have any more questions that we have a minute left before we move on to our next presenter. Any more questions? I know
Yes.
there's a few of them out there.
Yes. What type of services does the government seek out during an emergency? Can you provide a list of any top products or services that are in dire need?
Yes and no. I do not have a list of what is in dire need.
I'm gonna raise my hand.
Yes, Mr.
So,
Marks.
Hey, everybody out there, if you're talking with Kay's side of the house, we put out a thing about if you're in the building industry, because all these hospital expansions that have to be built, there's material needed for that. So those types of materials, what the Corps of Engineer needs, and we listed 3. If you were could provide those things to stand up, temporary facilities. If you're in that business or got connection to that, hey, you want to get your capability statement to the Corps of Engineers ASAP. Okay. If you are in the medical field, the Defense Logistics Agency, we will send you we're going to hang on the website some key links that take you directly to those folks. They're taking medical and non-medical supplies through DLA. FEMA has a link set up doing the exact same thing. And oh, by the way, the CDC was the first to start with the links, and they have direct links where you can submit proposals to the CDC that we can share. And it's all types of medical supplies. It's also non-medical supplies, PPE. As you've heard on news, everything they talk about at the president's, I forget the times that he does it, but between those press conferences they're doing, personal protective equipment, badly needed. So if you got links to that, those are types of things in this emergency that are sorely needed and won't get enough of.
Okay, we're going to, and Kay, we ask that if you can hang around, because we're going to open up to more questions at the end. Well, we're going to bring on Antonio right now. So this has been really informative and productive, and so I certainly appreciate it. And so we're going to come back at the end in our open chat segment to take on some more questions. And again, audience, there's a couple of things. We have some handouts for you, not only the bios of all the speakers today, but Tommy, what's the name of your smart book that has a lot of this information in it? We call it the smart book.
It's smart book, doing business with the federal government during the time of a disaster.
Okay, so it's a compilation of materials that Tommy and his team have put together that's in your handout section right now that you can have access to. And again, we're going to answer the questions and send them out later, but we certainly appreciate it. So thank you, Kay. We'll be right back with you as well. So let's bring on our next presenter, and that is Antonio Doss. We talked about him in the beginning. We can bring Tommy back on too. And Antonio, thank you. We're going to just let you drive a bit, because you were probably one of the most popular people last week as relates to the release of the stimulus bill and the information and people going out and applying for the payroll loans and all this other stuff. So if you could just kind of summarize some of that stuff with us. But before you leave, we also want to talk about what in the world is next after this. So Anthony, we'll let you just kind of drive for a minute.
All right, that makes it all the difference when you press that button that says unmute, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Right, what I want to do is just walk through some of the items that are happening within the federal space related to small businesses who need money right now, because a lot of revenue streams are limited or cut off in some cases completely. And there's a number of different challenges that businesses are facing in terms of how they're going to proceed with their activity. So I want to cover really 4 main points this morning. One deals with deferments as an option for businesses to, actually you don't have the PowerPoint. Let me just pull it up really quick here. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Is that right?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So here are the key items I want to cover related to the stimulus bill provisions. One is dealing with loan payment deferrals. Second, I'm going to talk about the CARES Act and particularly the Paycheck Protection Program. And the third is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And then lastly, I'll come back with one more element of the CARES Act that deals with the small business debt relief. This is a key thing here in terms of loan payment deferrals. Many of the people on the call, I suspect, have some sort of a business loan outstanding. It may be an SBA loan, it may be a non-SBA loan. In this case, it almost doesn't matter because at least you have some sort of path to get your loan, your existing loan deferred in terms of your monthly payment. So if you're a 7A borrower, for example, or a 504 loan borrower, or even if you have a micro loan with us, you can get your loan deferred for up to a period of 6 months. If you happen to already have an existing disaster assistance loans, we're automatically delaying those payments through December of this year. If you're not an SBA borrower, you can still go to your bank and say to your bank, I would very much like to not have to make my payment right now. I'm dealing with COVID-19 issues, and they too can put you on deferment. Normally, that's a bad issue for the bank because the federal regulators will come in and ding the bank for having poor loan quality in their portfolio, and it causes them to write down earnings. In this environment, that's changed because all of the federal regulator agencies, whether you're talking the FDIC, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, Federal Reserve, they all came together in unison and said to the banks, be supportive of these businesses and make adjustments, and we won't penalize you or write down your loans. So that's something that's available to everybody literally right now, and it doesn't really require much of an application. The second big thing, and the one that's probably the heavy topic right now, is the Paycheck Protection Program. You may hear it called PPP or 3P. They're all the same piece. What this is for businesses, and it's a wide swath in terms of businesses. So it is businesses that are sole proprietorships, businesses that are independent contractors, and it also includes nonprofits, veterans organizations. Typically, it's 500 or fewer employees. We have a few size standard exceptions, and if that's the case, we can visit about those. But generally, to simplify things, when this act was put in place, we used 500 as the limit for determining small or not small. Here's the way this one works. A business can get up to $10 million in a loan. These loans are set up basically to cover your payroll. The whole idea behind the Paycheck Protection Program is to allow businesses to keep employed those people who have worked as employees for your organization for, probably in some cases a lot of years. And we don't want to see them come off of the employment rolls. We want to see them continue to be gainfully employed so that as we get through the period of coronavirus, that we'll be able to move it back into our normal environment more quickly. So essentially, and this is a brief explanation of it, but the loans are based on about 2.5 times your monthly payroll. Yeah, and there's some other considerations for it, but that's the base point for you to consider. The interest rate is only 1%. There's a completely streamlined application process. So if you've applied for a business loan at any point in the past, like take the eraser out for your memory and rethink what this application is. It's much, much, much quicker. It's simply a one-page application in terms of information, and then some verification of some of your payroll expenses and things. So it's pretty quick. If you use the money mostly for payroll costs, then 75% or more, we can forgive that loan. So you don't actually even have to ever pay it back. So that's a big plus. There's no loan fees involved. There's no collateral. There's no personal guarantees. We're actually going to pay the first payments up to, or the first payments for the first 6 months will be paid by us. So you don't have to worry about making those payments. And from a lender perspective, we told the banks, we're going to give you 100% loan guarantee. And we're paying all the fees for processing right up front. So this is the item that is very, very active right now. And I'm sure we'll probably have a few questions related to it during the Q&A period. Another key piece that we have is our economic injury disaster loan program. And this one is for up to $2 million. These are direct loans. So the first example I gave you with the Paycheck Protection Program, those are through our banks and lenders. These when you actually come directly to us for a loan amount up to $2 million. The first 10,000, up to the first 10,000 is in a form of a grant, but really it's a loan, but it's a forgivable kind of arrangement. And so you may be able to have that full amount forgiven in its entirety. We expect that that's going to be the case. That will happen, as a matter of fact. And the interest rate for businesses is 3.75%. That's fixed on a term up to 30 years. And the first payment, we're not requiring you to make for a full year. So you've got a 12-month deferment on your first payment. And then additional piece of information on these economic injury disaster loans, it's for working capital. So think payroll, accounts payable, for your fixed monthly expenses, lease expenses, and anything that you typically would be paying as a part of your regular monthly payment to keep your business running. It's not meant for business expansion, to purchase another business with these funds, to acquire equipment or other big, fixed assets and such. And then lastly, I want to just quickly summarize what we're doing with the Small Business Debt Relief Program. And this is also part of the CARES Act. This applies to our 7A, 504, and microloans. So in this case, for any existing loan, we're going to pay automatically your payment for a period of 6 months. So you don't have to worry about making that cash outlay for your SBA loan. If you're getting a new SBA loan, we're also going to cover that for a period of 6 months, as long as you've gotten a loan between basically now and September 27th of this year. So that's a really, really quick rundown, pretty high level of where we are with our loan programs. And so I'm happy to pretend any questions that come along as well.
No problems. And we'll ask our attendees to please bear with us with the network. We're running a heavy load today, but I think that things are going fine. One of the things that, Antonio, that's been talked about, word on the street, actually, is that banks are really now cutting people off in terms of their ability to do the PPP program. Have you heard anything about it, or has there been any limitation?
This has been one of the challenges of the program. So I think in the government's best interest, the best interest, the government took an action to say, let's push the opportunity to fund the businesses to the hundreds and thousands of banks that exist in the country. What we found out in short time here so far is that a lot of the banks prioritized funding for their existing business customers. Some of them had limitations in terms of not just a business customer, but you had to be an existing borrower. And I think for a lot of the banks, because this is this loan program looks nothing like anything they're used to seeing as a banker. There's the fact that we don't have a personal guarantee. Many businesses have often asked for that. They've probably always been told, that's not happening. That's a myth. So it's caused a lot of the banks to be a little bit cautious with this. What we're trying to do now is get a better handle on who is more open for providing loans to any business, whether they're a business customer or not of that particular bank. But right now, those cases are fewer than we would like to have, and so we're working to try to figure out what that list looks like. Literally, right now, we're doing some surveillance on that front.
Okay. Tommy, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we open it up for questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So our Ken Clark and Sonia Bigelow-Smith, who are monitoring our questions, I know we have questions for Antonio Doss.
Yeah, Antonio, could you clarify, when do you go to the SBA and when do you go to the bank? The idle
great.
and the CARES kind of overlap sometimes in language.
Right. They're essentially they're kind of doing some of the similar work in terms of they're both focused on working capital. So if it's an economic injury disaster loan, that's actually done directly by SBA through our Office of Disaster Assistance. And applicants apply online to SBA. You can go to sba.gov for more information on all of these programs. If you're interested in the Paycheck Protection Program, that one is the one that we actually originate through the lenders. So those are the ones where you go to your bank first or non-bank lender. And by the way, we've also are in the process of signing up a lot of other additional lenders. Keep in mind that this whole thing moved extremely fast. If any of you have ever been familiar with government rulemaking, the fact that less than 2 weeks ago, we signed a bill into law, and within a week and maybe not even a full week really, we had regulations out on the street in an interim and final rule that says how we're going to process this program. It's pretty much unheard of. So we're still working through some of the particulars of it, but determined to provide good support to the small business community.
Okay,
Antonio, Tommy,
Yes, Tommy.
could you add to that, or could you clarify when you say go to the SBA, you're talking I should, as a contractor, I should go to my SBA district office, or I'm filing online to the SBA.gov?
Yeah, you want to go to sba.gov. In many cases, if you go to your local district office, you'll be doing like this, looking in the window, because so many of us are on telework status just because of the social distancing and all that's going on. And actually, that is the streamlined way to do it. Even our online application has been upgraded and streamlined since we initially launched that a couple weeks earlier.
excellent. Any other questions, please?
Good morning, Antonio. We have another question. Can we apply for the PPP and the EIDL loan? If we get the PPP loan, does that preclude us from being able to get the EIDL loan?
Yes, you can actually apply for both. And we have business owners who I'm sure have done that already. The key is that you don't use the money for the exact same purpose. So the economic injury disaster loan is a little bit more broad in terms of some of the ways you can use the money compared to the payment protection program loan. But you can do it. And if you have an economic injury disaster loan and you subsequently get a paycheck protection program loan, there's even a provision where you can refinance into your paycheck protection program loan the proceeds that came from the economic injury disaster loan. So it is definitely possible to do so. And I should also point out, if you have questions about this, our team at the district office is actively fielding questions. The phone lines have been a little more busy than normal. So we're picking up questions that way. We also have great support from our resource partners, whether you're talking about the ones we fund like SCORE and the Small Business Development Center and the Women's Business Center, and then also the PTACs have also been trained on the program, so they're assisting. So if you have questions, there's a lot of different ways you can get answers. Plus, we're continually updating information on our website.
Okay.
Another question is, well, actually 2 questions. How does this apply to sole proprietors, and are my 1099 employers covered by PPP?
Yeah, so you can, whether you're a sole proprietor or an LLC, it doesn't really matter. The framers of this particular legislation wanted to make sure everybody was included in it, even participants in the gig economy who don't look like a regular business from a lot of the business and financial statement perspective. And 1099 employees are also able to participate either. There's been some, as a matter of fact, there's been some recent information that just came out that I think is clarifying exactly how the 1099s work. So I'm going to try to say it, but if I need to give you guys an update, Sharon, I will send that back to you.
Okay.
In fact, I will send that back to you just to make sure, because I think it changed just from what it was a day or 2 ago.
Okay, and we certainly will distribute and make it available. Next question, please.
The next question is, I have logged into the SBA to check the status of my economic injury loan application.
Mm-hmm.
When will the SBA start providing those initial loans and make issuing funds?
And the question is when. Well, so one of the things that we did, we used a legacy approach for our loan program initially, the same one we use for our regional disasters that are typically tornadoes and earthquakes and floods and hurricanes and those sort of things. This national disaster, as Sharon pointed out earlier, is unprecedented. We've never had anything across our entire nation. And, to be honest with you, I think that legacy system didn't really have all the capabilities that we needed for this environment. And it was a little bit different set of circumstances. So we completely went back in and redid our entire approach to how we're handling the online applications. So during that pivot, I think we probably took a couple steps back in terms of how we were getting our processing done. Our original estimate was that we would be 18 to 21 days before a loan approval, and then a week to 2 weeks after that before a business would get funding. Once this initial backlog clears, which we're anticipating a lot of decisions coming through this week, as a matter of fact, based on our new robust platform, we anticipate that time frame will be in that 3 week or less period moving forward. But we're kind of getting through that initial backlog, and as you can imagine, we got a lot of applications in right at the beginning because people were really concerned about what sources of funding would be available to them.
Okay.
Antonio, is there a deadline for when CARES and EIDL loans can be, by which they can be applied? And what happens if I'm slow to get my application in and the money runs out?
Yeah, so to both of those questions, I would encourage businesses to pursue getting those loans earlier than waiting. There's $349 billion, which sounds like no one could ever use that much money so fast, but we're seeing a lot of demand. So if the loan forgiveness element is driving your decision process, or the $10 million amount is driving your decision process, then I would recommend that you consider pushing in for that sooner than later. Whether we have another tranche of funds that are provided by Congress, that's an unknown. Based on the way Congress has reacted so far, and historically, anytime SBA has really been in need of additional loan funding, they've been extremely supportive in a very bipartisan manner. So there's probably a good chance that there'll be additional funding, but I wouldn't bank on that at this point. So I would encourage you to look at your situation and move forward, as speedily as you can.
Okay, that's good advice. At this particular point in time, what I'd like to be able to do is bring Kay back on, and I'd like to also bring on Tennis Smith, and we can round out the next couple of minutes and just open it up and ask questions generally. Let's have our open chat here. for the next few minutes with questions. So waiting, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, Ken and Sonia, additional
Yes.
question?
Yes, there is a question, and for Antonio, can you share a little bit about what the underwriting qualifications are for submitting or receiving a loan?
Okay, for the Paycheck Protection Program, again, these are very different. We're literally looking at what your historic amount of payroll has been, using 2.5 months as the average benchmark for it, and some additional expenses that you may have a need for. But essentially, we're basing the loan amount on 2.5 months worth of your payroll. And as long as you can demonstrate that you've got that as a part of your historic funding that you needed for payroll expenses, that's the loan amount that we're using. And there's not a lot of additional underwriting behind it. We're not doing cash flow analysis. We're not asking you for 3 years of tax returns and financial statements. We're not asking you for a business financial statement. We're not asking you for any of the things that you typically might have been providing. And the idea is to get the money in really, really quick to the hands of the business owners so that they can keep their payroll going. So that's why we have this very streamlined program. That's why the federal government has authorized SBA to provide a 100% guarantee on these loans to the lenders.
This next question is back to the contracting side. Will my 8A status or Hub Zone status certification help in this process of getting contracts? And is there any expedited process to get any of these certifications right now?
Well, I'll jump in on the 8A side of it just really quickly. Okay. It's always a great thing, 8A, because of its simplicity. People don't have to go through the J&A justification, and they can do sole source and all those things. So it's really, really always a great option for contracting officers. And our team is very actively supporting 8A program offer letters for us to provide funding. So we're on board with that and happy to help right now where it's best we can.
I would just add that some of the inquiries we've gotten from the federal government, contracting offices, specifically looking for 8As, economically disadvantaged women-owned businesses. So the answer is, back to a case, if you can put that on that subject line in the email up front, it will help on your file. But in the end, contracting officers have the final decision on how they're going to go out, what they're going to do from an acquisition standpoint. And I believe, based on the contingency that we're in, the crisis, that they're doing their best to get those things on, trust me, on contract as soon as they possibly can. I mean, millions of dollars have already been awarded, probably billions that we just don't hear about on a daily basis based on what's going on.
It's a question for Kay. Will my GSA schedule, does Corps of Engineers buy off the GSA schedule? I guess is essentially the question.
Corps of Engineers can buy off the GSA schedule. That's not always how they go about things, but it is how they do things sometimes. I wanted to jump back. Earlier I was asking, what specific list are the Corps of Engineers buying? Basically right now, if you have anything in the 236 NAICS code, those are the primary interests right now for the capabilities within Army Corps. Then I also wanted to jump on another question someone had asked, and I'm sorry, it was misunderstood. They asked about underbidding. Please, I'm never suggesting that anyone underbids on anything. Always when you prepare a proposal or a bid, make sure that it is what is going to cost you to do the business. Don't deliberately underbid to hurt yourself. That's not going to work for anyone. It may get you an award, but that's the win in the short term is not a win in the long term. So please always make sure that your bids are what you can afford to do. When I mentioned a smaller project, I mean, if you have the capability to pave a road, but you see an opportunity for some paved sidewalks, jump on that one first time to get your foot in the door. That's what I mean by a smaller project, okay?
Okay, go ahead, Sonia.
There is one question back to Antonio. Can a company be eligible for PPP if they have more than 500 employees, but they are considered a small business on their contracts based on their primary NAICS code?
Yeah, there are some situations where we're actually still using the NAICS code determination because of the nature of this. Again, we're trying to streamline it. For people who are in government contracting, we're all really used to NAICS code determination. The general population, think about this. This was for anybody who does, home cleaning business, barber shop, Main Street retail. Most of them have no idea what NAICS codes really even mean and what it's about. So we try to keep it really simple and straightforward by using the 500 employee marker. If you've got a specific question about your NAICS code, just reach out, give us a call. We'll help happily walk you through that part of things to check your eligibility. The other part I mentioned earlier about the 1099, that the other question. So the guidance that's in our public document, our regulation, says that the 1099 employee should not be included in your payroll information because the 1099 employees can actually apply directly on their own. So that's what's in our reg.
Okay. I see that we have some hand raises here in the audience that, Shauna, if you can, I see a hand raise of Patricia, of Wendy Archer. Looks like there's a,
Absolutely. We have a ton of hands raised, so we can.
Okay, so, well, hold it, let me make sure of the hand raise here. It looks like, yeah, I'm seeing one of Patricia Bush has her hand raised.
Patricia, we're going to unmute you and you can feel free to ask your question. Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning. I did not have a question with the hand raise. I was just confused by this. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you for being here, Patricia.
And we asked that folks, this is all the new normal, right? And so the last couple of weeks, I don't know how many webinars we've been seeing or being on. And so we just all kind of adjusting. It's actually been kind of fun. So let's see if we can do another hand raise. I see Wendy Archer out there and also see, let's see if Wendy has a question. If not, Wendy, ask a question. Wendy, I hope you're still there.
Sharon, while you're waiting for that to come up, Antonio, some people applied to SBA loans before March 20th when then the system crashed, and now they've gone back in the system to try to find their application. They've not heard anything. Should they reapply, or do you know what may have happened?
They may already be being processed, but I would actually recommend they jump back in, reapply into the streamlined approach just to play it safe. Because we did have that time where the system really wasn't functioning. And I know we even had people who were sending paper copies, FedEx and that sort of thing of their application in. But the online system is really the best route to go. And it's much, much better now than it was just 3 weeks ago.
Okay. We can take another hand raise, Shauna.
Awesome. Brian Cheney, we have you here. Brian, I'm going to unmute your mic and you can feel free to ask your question. Good morning, Brian. Brian, are you with us? Okay, let's move on. Shalini Baga, we've got you here. You can feel free to ask your question.
Thank you. So my question is, earlier on you had said that preference is given to local companies a lot of the times, but what about like national services, right? So we do modeling, so we can help on a national basis in terms of planning for the services. So how does that work?
So if I understood what you asked, I don't want to leave you with the impression that the federal government is not doing contracting at the national level. Okay, my point is that for the crisis, most of that is pushed down to the local level, but every federal agency is still doing some buying at their level to do certain things. And for example, the Corps of Engineers has their non-COVID website, if you want to check out opportunities that they have, and every agency has that. So my best recommendation is that you go to the agency website, or they do forecasts, and they all got their OSGO offices there, and contact those folks.
Tommy, you've mentioned local several times. How do people find out where do they go to find, quote, local? Who is it that you mentioned when you say local?
Okay, when I say local, again, in the national emergency, every state has a state emergency management office. Sharon said the acronym for Maryland is MEMA.
Yeah.
You have to understand how those guys operate, because in a disaster, the priorities for what's going to take place in the state of Virginia are designated by the governor of Virginia through his state emergency management office. And so they're going to be working with FEMA and that whole partnership that they have, that's the boots on the ground I talked about, in order to get the resources to the place that the government is designated to be. So for example, in Prince, if it's in Prince William County where I live at, then along with the local and state officials, those contracts are going to be awarded through the state emergency management office. And so that's what takes place.
Okay, before we take the next question, Dennis, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share, if anything, you've been seeing at the MBDA Business Center, Washington, D.C., because you also deal with federal government, state, and local government as well.
Well, yes. The request from many of our businesses to participate in the process with PPPs, as well as how to be in contact with those in that 236 NAICS code that Kay spoke about. And so, Kay, I look forward to bringing those 236s and to making sure that they have registered properly and are able to interact with your office. They do work for some of the DoD offices. I'm not sure how much work they have done with USACE in particular, but they have done work in DoD, and so they do have some past performance. So I look forward to circling back. Those are some very good information that Tommy and you provided relative to the needs of many of the firms that I interact with on the daily.
And so we stand ready to be ready for our in our advocacy role for our minority businesses. Let's take a couple more questions, and then we can do a wrap.
There is one question. Can we please have a list of banks and FDICs who are participating in the Paycheck Protection Program, or where can we find a list?
Yeah, if you go to sba.gov, there's a big header up there for COVID-19 response, and you'll see on there when you ask about click the link for lender information, you can put in your zip code, and that'll bring up a list of lenders who are participating. I will also advise you that that list is not necessarily only going to show you the lenders who are taking businesses who are not customers. So we're in the process of trying to refine that list so that if you're, for example, if you're a Wells Fargo customer right now, Wells Fargo has said they've already reached their goal or their limit for the program. So they're not accepting more applicants. But there are Wells Fargo customers and other banks who have similar situations, and those customers are now looking for a place where they can get their funding. So as we bring on more of our lenders, including some of our fintech, financial technology companies, we'll be able to have more names on that list and make it easier for you. Right now, we're working to build that list so it's easier for you.
Okay, that's excellent. As we wrap this up, Kay and Antonio, any other tidbits that you want to share? And Ken, it sounded like you were about to ask a question.
Yes, it was for Kay and Tommy, Kay in Pacific and Tommy in general. Where can our MBEs submit unsolicited bids, or is it possible?
Unsolicited bids can come into a contracting officer. There's a whole process with that. My recommendation would be to reach out first and have that conversation with the small business deputy before submitting something. There's a lot of requirements that are on the government side when we receive an unsolicited bid, including who has to review it and so on. It would probably be in the best interest of your time to communicate clearly with the small business deputy and or a contracting officer prior to submitting it. Just first off, to find out if that is something that's going to be looked at as far as needed. Any unsolicited bid will be looked at.
To add to that, I would tell you that each agency is doing it a little different. We have some active links with CDC that are actually requesting proposals. So if you have a proposal in the medical side of the house that you think can help solve the problem, CDC is taking those proposals, and other agencies are doing the same. And it's the links that they have. But I will tell every agency today, if you go to their official websites, they have they got special instructions there just for COVID-19. It is the simplest thing I can tell you right out the box as you leave this webinar. You name a federal agency, Google it by name, and their official website will come up. It will say it's official, and take off running. That's actually what I'm doing every day to try to keep pace.
And Tommy, I'm going to let that be the last word. It's getting near the 11 o'clock hour, and I'd like to first thank our incredible team of experts. Thank you so much, Kay Riplinger-Baltz, for being a part of this conversation. It's very, very much appreciated. Antonio Das, thank you again for being here with us, and of course, member our team of Tommy Marks and Dennis Smith, and the whole consortium, the CRM-SDC Business Consortium, which includes those three entities, and the team that you don't see that does all the work. And of course, we appreciate Graybill Media being headed by Shalonda Stokes for helping us with this broadcast. And so with that, just a reminder that we have handouts for you. We are going to post this webinar as well as answer the outstanding questions and continue down this road. We transform our newsletter into HotSheet Live today, but there'll be many things forthcoming because, as you know, we don't know when the end is in sight, although we do, we're very optimistic. And so our job is to advocate for and ensure that communication is made to our minority businesses. So with that, we say thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's a wrap.